Okay, so welcome to the working group device management meeting for September 30th. I'll be your host today. I'm Patrick Uli. Let me start a screen sharing of the agenda and then we can get started. Can you see that all okay? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, well, I don't know. Sometimes it helps to verify. Yeah, I just did a quick update on the first item. That's perhaps something that we need to go through quickly before we dive into topics that take a bit longer. So remember the production readiness freeze for CAPS in this release cycle for 135 is coming up this week. It's on Thursday, I believe. End of
I think
day.
2 weeks.
2 weeks?
I thought it was October 9th.
It is. You're right. And that's next week. Okay. Thanks. As it's still feeling quite close. Yeah. So that avoids the pressure a little bit, but only a little bit, because we still need to get several PRs ready for different features. I just had a quick look, and of the things that we wanted to promote, basically the top 4 or 5, the extended resources requests doesn't have the final PR yet. There are 2 pending, but they are only doing minor changes. Resource claim status, Antonio, do you know whether that's coming? Or Lionel, if you're on the call?
I talked with Lionel and I need to catch up with him, but I think that we were missing only implementation, and I saw them sending PRs to the second implementation, so I need to confirm with him. I will do
Yeah,
that
I looked
tomorrow.
at the CAP issue, and it doesn't have anything for GA graduation yet. So basically, it stops at
Okay.
134.
I need
It
to
might not need much if you're not changing anything. It just says we are promoting to GA, and that's mostly it. And then checking criteria and so on. But there needs to be a CAP update for that. Yeah, Kevin?
Yeah, some of these that are like long-lived alphas, like partitionable devices, I'm PRR shadow this cycle. It'd be helpful to know if we would need any re-review of the production readiness.
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not entirely sure under which conditions the production readiness team wants to do those reviews again. My understanding so far has been that if you are not changing anything significant, you don't need a re-review. Sometimes I usually try to I make that statement in a PR for the CAP and hope that someone from the production readiness teams confirms it. And so far that has always been confirmed along those lines, but I'm not sure whether it's formally documented anywhere.
Yeah, I
Well, I
think
know
that's fine. Sorry.
for
Go
the
on,
specific
Kevin.
for the specific case of the partitionable devices, it's staying alpha, but there are extra features that we're planning on adding to that in this release. So it
It's
is a
an
good
API
question whether,
change.
and it's even an API change. So
Yeah.
it does feel like it would warrant a new PRR in this specific case.
Could be. I'm not sure how big the impact is on the PRR section. It's
Yeah,
about
I'm not sure. I need to look at it.
separating the counters from the claim from the slice, or making the counters reusable across multiple slices. That's the API change, and it does have a few impacts on how much work the scheduler needs to do, because it now needs to do validation that previously was done in the API server. So yeah, there might be some impact. Shouldn't be too big, but it might be worth calling out. I don't know.
I was planning to request a
Yeah.
PR review on it.
Okay. That's always the safe side, of course. Yeah. So admin access. Do we have Rita on the call?
Yeah, I am.
Okay.
Yeah, we discussed this item with Auth yesterday as well. I don't think there's any blockers from Auth. I think we may get some pushbacks for PR since one of the requirements for going to stable is ensuring that there's enough adoption, and I don't think there's been any yet. I have a PR up for in the example DRA plugin repo, but that's in the example one,
Um,
right?
DRA drivers do not necessarily. Well, they need to they might have to support it for the permissions checks that they are doing around detecting reuse, incorrect reuse of devices. So yeah, we could argue that DRA drivers need to support it for that
I think
aspect. Yeah.
I think the goal of this one, and Kevin can add more here, but I think this is to reduce the permissions required from the DRA drivers. Like today, I think a lot of troubleshooting or logging, like say DCGM exporter requires a lot of permission on the node, right? So having this feature would actually reduce the surface area.
Well, there's multiple aspects to it. That one is that they don't need to run privileged anymore right now
That's right.
to support these use cases where they need access to all of the GPUs. They either need to run privileged or they have to run with our kind of weird behind the back hacky NVIDIA Container Toolkit solution, which uses an environment variable to inject a bunch of stuff into the container. And admin access allows us to solve that without kind of natively using CDI and DRA.
That's right.
Yeah, that's the main use case for it for us. We just haven't had time to integrate it into our driver yet. But we have a very concrete and a very valid use case across multiple components. It's just that we haven't pulled it in yet.
So should we decide to keep it in beta until you do?
Versus graduating to GA, you're saying?
Yes. Yes.
I
I mean,
just
that
know
feels
that
like,
we
yeah, go
could.
ahead.
I just know that we will probably get some pushbacks. I feel like that would get some pushback because that was a requirement to go to GA.
Yeah, I agree. I think it feels like we should wait. It feels like that's the more responsible thing to do, is wait until we actually have, because Rita, there's no other drivers that are
There's
currently,
no other drivers that's
there's no
doing
others.
this
Yeah.
yet. And for
Yeah.
what it's worth,
Then
beta, this feature is enabled by default in beta, so it's not actually blocking people if they want to use it.
Yeah.
So is that the consensus to wait till 136 and give NVIDIA a bit of time to integrate the feature so that when we do put up the PR request for 136, there will be no blockage. Does that
that
sound right?
sounds reasonable to me.
Same.
Okay.
Okay. I already started editing the document.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, for the next one.
Yes, 135.
Okay, then I'll just opt out of 135 then for this
I'm
one.
not even sure whether you were opted in. I think I did have a quick look and I didn't see anything.
I think I might have because we agreed that we would do it for 135. So anyway, not a big deal. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Coming to mine, device taints and tolerations. The PR for the cap is up. A few people have looked at it. I made one more change. I now plan to do conditions in the device taint rule status. I think that's a more natural API. So that's still targeting 135, but as another alpha. I think we talked about partitionable devices, and that stays in alpha, does another PRR because of the changes, and that's in progress. Yeah, I think looking at the others, I think we we are close to just saying that I don't know about resource health. Doesn't be. And the question was list type. I don't even have a cap and an owner for that at this point. Oh, there is an owner, but I haven't seen any cap updates. So maybe we don't know yet. I think that was a question from Kevin on chat, which I just briefly saw it pop up. Let's go through the list quickly. Resource health status. I don't think we currently. Well, there were some questions, but I think the current plan still is to do it with device taints until we figure out something absolute different that needs a new API binding conditions. A lot points towards that just staying in alpha because feedback, real world feedback is not there quite yet. And the beta is depending on some other Kubernetes scheduler feature that stays in alpha. It's not a hard dependency, but the use cases depend on it. So it would be an incomplete solution in 135. Consumable capacity. I think we decided already that it stays in alpha with bug fixes, opted in, hopefully, because we should just make the release team aware that we're doing things, but I'm not even sure whether it needs a cap update. If the cap doesn't change and we're just doing bug fixes, we just need to opt it in. Reserved for workloads, that's under discussion. No real cap at this point. Prioritized alternatives. Do we change anything? I don't think so. No. Device attributes, that's all from here on, it's all in planning. No cap updates that I'm aware of. Yeah, and mix-ins already got delayed. So yeah, that's the list. We have a few things that we can specifically work on, but that's in progress. The one that I would like, where I would like to see a cap update soon is the first one. Because we may have to discuss quite a few things for beta graduation in a cap update, and now we only have we have more time than I thought, but it's still not enough. It's still not that much time anymore. Okay. With that, do we have John actually? He had another topic, the topology aware scheduling, but he already said that he only has half an hour, and I took a lot of time, but I haven't seen him, so perhaps he's not even on the call at all, and we need to skip that. Yeah, I don't see him. So let's skip that topic. John, do you want to talk about the AI conformance?
Yes. So as we get closer to having vendors actually self-attest for all of the AI conformance requirements, we're taking a look at how to actually test some of these in kind of a concrete way. And one of the requirements I was looking at is this secure access requirement. So I think the issue has the verbatim text of the requirement. But it essentially means that if you give a device to a container, then no other container should be allowed to access that device, like depending on, as long as the device isn't shared between another container explicitly and that sort of thing. So I did take a look at the EDE tests, and I did see one that I think probably covers this, but I'd like feedback to see if that test is good enough, or if we or if that's not good enough, then what are the gaps we would need to fill? So in particular, that test essentially configures different requests with different environment variables, and then makes sure that the right containers have the right environment variables. So it's not necessarily testing like device access, but it's still all using the CDI stuff under the hood and making sure that that config doesn't kind of bleed into other containers. So yeah, I guess if anybody has feedback on what would be required to actually test this requirement for DRA, that would be great. So yeah, if anybody has feedback now or wants to follow up later, please reach out. Rita, did you have any other comments on that?
I think this might be a question for AI conformance group as far as where do people put the output from these tests, since we don't really have tests yet. But I also think this is a good opportunity to ask, like, would this test eventually be part of Kubernetes conformance? I'm guessing.
I don't think any of these tests that depend on DRA drivers on a node can ever be part of Kubernetes conformance. And the reason is that kubelet itself is not required to support a DRA driver or deploying a DRA driver in a certain way that you can write a generic test that exercise that you basically would have to have a cluster with the DRA driver installed in some way, and then you may be able to write pods or to schedule workloads configured to use a certain DRA driver, and then may be able to get to check from some behavior. But in a conformance test, we can't assume that the cluster has a DRA driver to start with. So yeah, Antonio?
Yeah, I'm slightly familiar with this topic. I think that this is not the right forum. I think that the conformance group is trying to build another conformance that is not the same conformance, and we all get confused with all the terminology. So to go in the core Kubernetes, SIG architecture owns the conformance, SIG testing owns the E2E testing framework. So I think that it's better to fork this conversation and target in that group if we want to make it in core, and how to implement it, because as Patrick says, we have now already some semantics for some names, and we cannot mix these things with the new AI conformance because of the reason Patrick is saying. We cannot ask people to have a DRA driver, right? So this working group is important, but I don't think that is the right forum for discussion.
I tend to agree. It could be useful to reuse some of the existing tests to test some aspects of the cluster that go beyond Kubernetes conformance. Because my current thinking is that for many of the existing DRA tests, which cover core functionality in the control plane, for example, or even with kubelet, with our test driver, these are things that we have in our E2E test suite that people could run against their cluster once we have feature gates enabled and all of that. And it would go beyond what is Kubernetes conformance. So I see value in including these tests somehow in an AI tests, but it's not the tests that you are talking about here, because our tests in upstream Kubernetes, they are not testing specific driver behavior. They can't make assumptions about what drivers are in the cluster. So they all test with the test driver. Okay, Rita?
Yeah, there's some questions in the chat. Not sure if you're looking at it, but I think one question I had was in around what is the level of verification we need to do to verify if CDI enablement is there. Because I think
that's that is exactly what you would get out of these tests that I just described. So basically running E2E test with a focus on DRA. That is something that should pass in any cluster that we would consider ready for AI with DRA. It tests that the test driver can be deployed, that CDI works in kubelet and all of that, but it makes the assumption that the kubelet, for example, supports driver registration. And that aspect keeps those tests out of the conformance test suite. It will not be promoted to Kubernetes conformance tests because we can't require that kubelet supports this. So no, we don't have any, and we will not have any Kubernetes conformance test that is covering these aspects. It can't. It's against our policies and against what Kubernetes conformance is. It's not as detailed as describing such low-level kubelet aspects. Kevin?
Yeah, there's kind of an interesting discussion here. So in the working group AI conformance, there's a lot of questions around DRA and conformant drivers, and it sounds, and a lot of in that group were saying that device management would probably be the people we'd want to talk to on this. And so, yeah, it's kind of, I'm not exactly sure who to go for these kind of questions, because like that group is like gonna rely on the DRA folks to come up with like, you know, our drivers quote unquote conformant, but it sounds like we're saying that's not really in scope of this group.
No, I think that there is a confusion here. So there are the technical part is you want to put some test on conformance, and then it's when what Patrick was explaining is conformance already has a meaning, right? That's the CNCF conformance, and the working group is trying to define an AI conformance. I think that those are two separate things. So we cannot conflate both things, because what Patrick says, we cannot say now everybody you need to install CDI, enable whatever, and all these things, because we make a promise to say we are going to define a standard way of what is a Kubernetes. Now this working group AI conformance, my understanding is that they want to define a new level of conformance to say, oh, if I need to run AI applications, I need to enable all these specific cases. So the question that I think that you are asking is, where are these tests going to live? Is the question that I don't think anybody knows the answer. But what we know is that they cannot go into the existing CNCF conformance, because we break the portability of the distributions that they don't want to enable CDI or DRI. Does it make sense or not?
Yeah, sorry, I'm just asking for clarity here. I think what I'm hearing is, and please let me know if this is correct. Sounds like you're saying CDI enablement is not required for Kubernetes conformance. but it is
It's
required.
not, yeah, it's not tested by the conformance suite. We do have a certain, no, actually, when you look at the Kubernetes APIs, the ones that we just graduated to GA, it doesn't in the V1 API say anything about CDI. It
Right.
says that if you allocate a device, the node component that is responsible for starting the pod will make those devices available inside the container. That's the GA guarantee from DRA. The current implementation, and that's really is an implementation detail, is that kubelet and DRA drivers communicate with each other with a V1 kubelet API, a gRPC interface, and they depend on CDI. But that's only one way of implementing this functionality. DRA
But
drivers, obviously.
The conformance test, there is a conformance test exercise in that part, Patrick?
No, there isn't. There isn't, because it is an implementation detail. Yeah, we have tests, of course. Most of the DRA tests do this. They do depend on CDI support and the runtime, and driver registration, and support in kubelet for detecting that a driver has been installed, and all of that. And all of that is testing a certain implementation of DRA in upstream Kubernetes, but it's not required to work like that in all Kubernetes conformant clusters.
Unless you go to SIG architecture and you make the point and everybody agree and say,
Yes.
oh, we
Yes.
want CDI, and then promote the test, and then indirectly you are making that. So there is a path. I think that we are spreading current state, but not future state. So if the project decides to say, okay, this is something that we are going to require, goes to SIG architecture, the tests get promoted, and everybody inherits the behavior.
I tried. I already created an issue for SIG Node about standardizing plugin support, and that is for device plugins and DRA driver and container storage interface. All of those depend on the same kubelet API and some way of deploying a driver in a cluster so that it works. And I was trying to figure out whether SIG Node would be interested in having an official way of doing that. And so far, the feedback has been more negative than positive. Because they don't want the kubelet implementation to define a standard for all Kubernetes distributions. So I suspect if someone went to SIG-Arc and said we want this standardized, there would probably be pushback. Because kubelet is just one way of managing a node, and it's not required. What's required is the public API, so that a node behaves in a certain way, but it's not required that it runs kubelet.
Yeah, I mean, I hear you. Again, I think Antonio is kind of saying what I'm saying in that I'm more asking for future, like this group, right? What do you think? Should that be the expectation?
I think it is the expectation because DRA
I don't
vendors
think so, because
need
otherwise you
this.
get a
Yeah,
Kubernetes.
vendors need this. If they want to ship a DRA driver, they have to code against certain APIs, and that's the only thing that we have. If someone decides to ship a Kubernetes distro that does things completely different, they are on their own to make those DRA drivers work somehow.
Exactly.
But then the question really is, do we want to limit AI conformant clusters further than upstream Kubernetes conformance? That's a call for your conformance working group. I always working group here, but I'm not sure whether we can make that decision. It's to me it sounds like more under your purview, where you say, okay, we come up with a conformance program, whereas this group here basically accepts, at least I do, I accept the current status where we say, well, we support implementing DRA drivers and deploying them in clusters that do this, but vendors need to make sure that this really works in the targets in their target Kubernetes distros, and we are not making any guarantee.
Yeah, I think and I discussed this with the other AI conformance working group leads as well, is we're happy to kind of be the catch-all for now for what's not in the Kubernetes conformance. However, for something as basic as a CDI enablement, I, for one, don't think that's AI specific. I mean, I could be wrong here, but I just felt like that's more of a DRA feature. Like without the CDI enabled, like a lot of the DRA features wouldn't be functioning, right? So
It's not even just a lot of them. At least right now, it's a hard requirement. If you don't have
right,
CDI
exactly.
turned on, DRA doesn't work.
So my
But it's not
question
only,
is,
but it's
why is that AI specific?
DRA
DRA
drivers.
drivers. Yeah.
The existing
No,
DRA drivers don't work without this.
No. I
Actually,
have a driver.
Antonio is right. Actually, yes,
Yeah,
we have
I don't
counter
use
examples.
CDI.
Sorry, can you repeat?
Look, I there is what you say, Patrick, is important. Is the key here is that the CDI is very specific, and there are other ways. So I don't know if the node people is okay to maintain and say now CDI is an official API of Kubernetes, because that is what making it conformance imply, and that's a slippery slope.
It is an official kubelet API, but it's not
official.
required.
I'm playing David Advocate. If you go to SIG Network and somebody comes with an API like CNI, right, and you say, "Oh, I want to make CNI," is indirectly CNI is kind of conformance. You don't know, right? We are not asking people to enable CNI. is the only thing that the runtimes implement. But you tell me a signal where I want CNI to be a specific API of Kubernetes, I would say no, because it's an API that's not developing Kubernetes, it's out of tree, it's not depending in a Kubernetes project, blah, 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 blah. So that's, I'm trying to put context and play devil advocate here.
Yeah. I think that's I'm okay with that current status. So yeah, Rita, I hear you, but I think if you and your working group you decide that this needs to be pushed upstream, you need to have a discussion with SIG architecture.
Yeah,
And
got it. Yep,
yeah.
I just want to understand where y'all were thinking. Yeah, thanks.
Okay. John, I think we touched on a few things. Did we cover your point? Do you want to move on to the next one?
Yeah, I'm ready to move on to the next one. So yeah, this is just a quick PSA that I have a PR open for a first full draft of this KEP to allow drivers to return a permanent failure from a node prepare resources call. So the gist here is that we'll add a new field in the gRPC API for drivers to fill that in, indicating that an error is permanent. And then when a kubelet receives that, it will mark a pod as failed and then handle a failed pod like it normally would, as in giving up on that until the pod is deleted. So yeah, that's the general approach there. Looking for feedback on that. I know I got to that kind of late for this cycle, but just wanted to make sure that didn't slip and under anybody's radar.
Yeah. That falls under SIG node, right?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Kevin, I don't know. Is that on
Yeah.
your tracking sheet?
It's on my radar. We already return from the GPU driver. We have the notion of permanent versus non-permanent failures. We just can't do anything with that information at the moment. It's just a matter of, we have an internal retry loop, and we stop that loop if we have a permanent error and return it back to the kubelet. And this would just be an extension of that. When the kubelet now gets this permanent error back, it would be able to fail the pod rather than keep retrying. But yes, to answer your question, it is on my radar as something to review.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I also wonder about the SIG node tracking sheet because they do have a board for KEPs that they are handling this cycle. We need to get them to track this one too.
Well, yeah, I did see
We
Peter
have-
did just add the KEP
Peter
issue
Hunt.
to the
Yeah.
the 135 milestone and opted in.
Good.
So if
Good.
there's anything
Okay,
we need to
then-
do on the PR, I can chase whoever needs to do things to that.
Okay. Oh, at least that's not SIG scheduling. I think SIG scheduling is our bottleneck again in terms of reviews for the other KEPs. Yeah. That's a good call out. I didn't quite get to yours because it's so down the list, but we should probably reshuffle. Now that we have pushed back some of the others, we should have a clear line of things that we really want to be done in 135 and the one that are stretch goals or well, at least still in the race, like yours. Perhaps after the meeting, I'll reshuffle a little bit. Anything else that people want to discuss? I did not ask for other topics. We have time, so if anyone is on the call who has not introduced themselves, it feels like they would like to say something to the group, but it's also always welcome. Sometimes we have new participants that are just never getting time to speak.
Hello, Patrick.
Hello.
My name is Nuruddin. That's the first time that I attend this meeting related to device management. I watch all CNCF videos related to device management and want to thank you, the community, for their effort. And wanted to know if I can help in anything has an entry point.
Yeah, it's sometimes a bit difficult now to jump into one of these existing efforts and contribute, because you do have to have a certain background knowledge. Once you're familiar with DRA, once you have gone through the tutorials that we have for 134, then you have an understanding of what it's all about, and you may be able to help with some of the open issues. But we are not exactly tracking good first issues either. John is probably going to hate me, but I'm always pointing people towards the example driver, which does have a few open issues, I believe, where people could contribute and where the risk is low that they are breaking anything important, quotation marks, because the example driver just really is an optional component. It doesn't need to work in a production environment, doesn't need to be completely bug-free. Of course, we would like it to be, but yeah, basically that would be, in my opinion, a good starting point. So John is maintaining that. We had Kevin originally as an author. It all depends on how much time they have to shepherd new contributors to in that space.
Yeah, I will check it and try to do my best. Thank you, Patrick.
And the example driver is a good starting point. Basically, once you are able to run it, then you should also be in a good position to modify it and look at what it does, what open issues it has, and try perhaps there is something. I can add that on Wednesday last week, a few more folks showed up for the first time that I think wanted to join this meeting, but they are not here today. Perhaps next time. So yeah, more people coming on board. That's always nice to see.
Hi, Patrick. Yeah, I was there on Wednesday last week.
Yeah, there you are.
Introducing myself. I'm Nitish, interested in working on DRA from AMD side. I've been asking some questions in this library. Yeah, excited to work with the group.
Yeah, thanks for the reminder. I was checking the participant list, but I just missed you. Okay. Anything else? Any last topics, last thoughts? If not, we can make that a quicker meeting than usual. Doesn't sound like there is anything. In that case, thanks for the discussions again, and see you next time. And let's work on those caps and on the features, of course. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye, thanks.